everybody, this is Tracy here for another edition of Iyanla Fix My Life, Season 5, Episode 3, which was titled Crack Addiction, Abandonment, 7 Broken Brothers, Part 1. So this was part 1 of what's going to be a 3-part series, and it's dealing with 5 brothers. Well, actually it's dealing with a mom, a dad, 5 of their 7 sons, and their daughter. And because of the parents' drug addiction, they were placed into the foster care system. They were separated, and there were times that they were together, and just as y'all can imagine, their lives have turned out to be a mess. And so all the brothers deal with their parents' issues and other struggles and their own struggles that they're going through, which includes one of the brothers being in prison and another one who has died. So at the beginning of the episode, Iyanla introduces the Mitchell brothers, and all of them got the name that began with M. So I was like, oh my God. So the brothers are Michael Jr., who is age 36, and he's the oldest of all the 7 boys. Marquise, who's age 32, and he blames Michael for their brother's death. And McQuail, who's age 30, he's like the peacemaker of the family. And then Marvin, who is 29, and he's the one that wrote to Iyanla and said that he wanted help for his family. And then the youngest brother, Melvin, who just be flapping off. You know, he's the one that think he got all the sense and he's smarter than everybody else in the group, and that he got the answer to everything. And then the brother, okay, so the brother that died, who I think would have been 36, his name was McQuail, and he was killed June 10th of 2013. Then they have another brother named Monte, who I can't remember where he fell in the order of ages, but I'm thinking he probably was like 33 or something. But when he was 16 years old, he got arrested for robberies, a string of robberies, and I guess it was strong arm robbery, because they sentenced him to 70 years. That's right, 70 years in prison. And I'm thinking, like, at 16 years old, like you just saying, wasn't no hope for him to be rehabilitated. Ooh, the system know they be screwing our brothers over. So this is the first time that all the 5 brothers have been under the same roof since the one named McGuell's funeral. So as the brothers arrive, Iyanla is outside to greet them. So, you know, she greets them, they tell them who they are, and so then she sends them into the house. So we get a little bit of the back history about, you know, why their lives are so chaotic and, you know, what's going on. It's basically what has happened is the mom ended up strung out on drugs, and then she left. And I guess she left to go to rehab or whatever. Somehow she left, or she just booked up and said she needed to get away after she had made all these 8 kids, because they also got a sister. So she leaves. And then the father, I guess, he tried to keep the kids and keep the family together, But then he had to rely on social services like welfare, Section 8 and all this here, and food stamps. So that meant that he had to have a caseworker. So the caseworker came in and decided that he could not care for the kids, all those kids, by himself. And rather than getting him the help that he needed and bringing people in, they decided to put the kids into foster care. So we find out, like through the conversations that they're having when they're sitting around, is that the oldest brother, Michael, he's a little slow because he was born addicted to drugs. And they didn't really go into detail like what his mental disability is, but they just kept saying that, he was slow. So then the brother Marquise, or Marcus, it was spelled K-I-S, but anyway, the brother Marcus, he felt that it was his responsibility to take on the paternal role for all the brothers. And so he kind of like became the leader of the family, because he done totally discounted Michael, because Michael is kind of slow. So then we get into the story about Miguel and how Miguel died, and it was so confusing because it sounded like it was some drugs involved in the situation. And I guess Michael, I don't know if he was selling drugs or taking drugs, but I guess the people were going to rob him. And then he went and told Miguel, and Marcus was supposed to have been coming to go take care of the situation, but I guess he took too long. So then Miguel and Michael went to deal with the situation themselves, and then Miguel ended up getting shot. And so now Marcus is mad at Michael because he's saying that Michael caused Miguel's death, because if they had just waited for him to get there, things would have turned out different. And then Iyanla was like, well, how would it have turned out different? And so he said, because somebody would have died. And then Iyanla said, well, somebody did die. It just wasn't the person you wanted to die. But you went there with the intent that somebody was going to die that night. And now you're angry because it wasn't the other people that died. It was your brother that died. As they're talking about the brother's death, then the brother Melvin, and then let me stop right there, because the two younger brothers, Melvin and Marvin, when they walked up, we already knew they had some sugar in the tank. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, that this is where we go hear the story about the molestation in the foster care system, and this is how these boys, and because y'all know most of the time it starts with some molestation. As much as people be talking about they was born that way, we know there's a whole lot of them that were turned that way because they were sexually abused as children. So Melvin, he was the one that he's the one I'm saying that was a Mr. Know-it-all. So he and Marcus get into arguing, and they get to talking about what happened. But the thing is, none of them were there. The only one that was there was Michael. But then they don't trust Michael's account of what happened, because they discount him because he has some mental issues. So the two of them get to arguing and carrying on. And so Michael, he continues to explain what happened, the best he could. And he tells Iyanla that he was robbed previously, and that the robber, warned him that they would kill him and Miguel if they returned to this drug turf that was going on. So then Melvin jumps in and telling them that Marcus nor Michael didn't tell all the details of what happened. And then, Melvin was like, we didn't know all of that. This stuff y'all talking about now, we're just now learning about this. So then during one of his confessionals, Marvin says that he heard multiple stories, surrounding Miguel's murder, and he doesn't really know what happened. So then Marcus then tells Melvin that he went with Michael and Miguel to find the people who robbed Michael. So then Melvin was like, what did Melvin say? How can you be upset with Michael and you didn't even tell us this part? Because as far as we knew, you weren't there. And he said, all we know is that Miguel was going down at the liquor store. Like, that was the only part of the story we knew. And then Iyanla asked Marcus, if he's upset with Michael. And then Marcus says, yes, I am, because it was more to the story than what y'all know about. And then Iyanla was like, well, maybe there isn't more to the story. So that's when they got into the whole part about, somebody was gonna die that night, and he was just mad that it turned out to be his brother. And then Melvin, he jumps back on Marcus, for being upset with Michael because of his mental impairment. And then next, Michael continues, Michael's still trying to get his story out. So Michael was like, we were set up. And then he started talking about somebody wanting to serve him, which means, you was there to buy drugs. And then when he, arrived on the scene, he was robbed. During his confessional, he explains that Michael was an easy target to be taken advantage of, and Miguel knew about this and went to confront the people, who robbed Michael. Then Marvin says that the reality of the situation was that Michael put them all in the situation, because if he wasn't doing drugs, not there trying to buy or sell drugs or whatever he was doing, none of this would have happened. So as Michael continues to try and tell his story, Marquise sits next to him, and he's shaking his head. So Iyanla notices this and asks him, why is he doing this? And so then Marquise explained that Miguel was overprotective of Michael and quickly went to Michael's defense, after he had gotten robbed by the drug dealers. So this whole account just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I don't think they ever came to a clear understanding of what really happened that night. The only thing we really know and the only thing that really matters is that Miguel ended up dead. Then we found out, she asked, because I think Marquise started saying that, he didn't care whether he lived or died, and if he had gone there and he had been the one to get killed, it wouldn't have been no big deal, because, that's his job. He's supposed to protect his brothers. And then Iyanla asked him, did he have any kids? And he said, yeah, I got 4 kids. And she was like, okay, why do you sit there talking about you don't care if you would have died that night when you got 4 kids that's dependent on you? Like, how crazy does that sound? And I don't think we ever found out if the kids are actually a part of his life, or if he was just out there spreading his seed around and making these babies. So I don't know, how good of a father he really is in this situation, because he done had to grow up fast and trying to raise his other brothers and try and keep them in touch with each other. And oh Lord, it was a mess. So after that whole big ruckus and discussion going on, Iyanla sits down to have a one-on-one with Marvin. And so with Marvin, the one that called the show. And so he explains to Iyanla that he is seeking everyone to forgive each other and their parents so they can move forward, because they have all suffered so much already. And he explains that a caseworker explained that a family wanted to adopt all of them. And this is where he learned that he had more than one brother, because I guess he had another brother out there. And as they were telling the stories, it was so confusing, because at one point he said that they were all in the same foster house together, foster home together, and that Marquise decided to run away and left him and Melvin there, I guess, or maybe Marquise and the older brothers left them. But anyway, whatever happened, he ended up, there was I don't know how it works where they are, but I know here in Florida, once you turn 18 in the foster care system, like they literally put you out. Like unless you have a foster family that really loves you and cares about you and will let you stay. But for the most part, like when they turn 18, they can go to college. They'll pay for them to go to college, and they'll give them like SSI benefits and stuff. But they are basically on their own. So I don't know if it was a situation where the older brothers were about to age out of the system, so they just left. But whatever the situation was, the two, well, he didn't say him and Melvin. He said that a 19-year-old who I guess was a foster son, like befriended him and started taking him places and showing him things and buying him gifts and everything. And so one night or one day they were laying down, and then he felt the boy, kind of like going down in his pants and everything. And so he felt that people aren't nice to you unless they're expecting something in return. So he didn't stop the boy from molesting him. And so that's how he got turned down, and I guess that's how he turned gay. And so he told Iyanla that he likes to travel a lot. you know, to escape what all is going on in his reality now that he's an adult. And so Iyanla was like, oh, well, that's good. You know, like, where do you travel to? And so instead of him giving us a destination of where he travels to, he says that he goes to meet young boys. Now, when he said he goes to meet young boys, now I don't know if he meant he go to meet underage boys or if he's just referring to great gay people as boys. But he says he goes to meet boys to have sex with them. And so I'm thinking that he's having trouble dealing with his sexuality, because why do you have to go sneak off to have sex with people? Like, why can't you have a healthy whole relationship where you are, like where you live? Why do you have to travel to meet people that you can't make a connection or a relationship with? And so while they were talking, he was saying that he felt that Marcus and his other brothers abandoned him because they, you know, were his protection while they were at the house, but then when they left, and then I think he also mentioned that they were, so maybe the family that adopted all of them, maybe it was somebody in their house that molested him. It was moving so fast, I couldn't figure it out. But I know Iyanla told him that, you know, what happened to him wasn't his fault and that he's got to learn to forgive himself. And she asked him, you know, how does he cope? He says, searching between a man's legs, and, you know, to find love that he never received from his parents. And then he also says that he thinks about killing himself every day. And Iyanla tells him, you know, that's definitely not the answer. So we're going to have to move on from that and make sure that that doesn't happen. You know, and then she hugged him. And it was just so emotional, like when she would hug them, because you know that this is probably the first time that they've ever had like a mother's hug and that kind of nurturing and affection in their life before. So then later on, she meets with all the brothers in the backyard, and she has them doing, you know, we got to have them building exercises. So she had gave them these 2x4s, and I guess they were supposed to work together to tie the 2x4s together to build like a shelter. And of course they got to arguing, and I think Melvin was the one that got pissed off and walked off. And no, I think Melvin started the argument, but then Marvin got upset and said he wasn't going to do it. So then Iyanla catches up with him, you know, and convinces him to come back and, you know, work with the brothers. So Marvin returns and apologizes for walking off. And that was one thing I noticed about these boys, like no matter what they have been through, all the heartache, heartbreak, all the, you know, just the things that have happened to them, they were the most mannerable. Now, they was cussing each other out, but they were so respectful of Iyanla. They were so mannerable. I mean, like articulating their, you know, just, they didn't seem like, if you met them on the street and didn't know their story, you never would have thought that this was their story because of just their mannerism. And I don't know, it's just like, you know, they argued with each other, but they weren't arguing with Iyanla. They were so respectful of Iyanla, so it was kind of like confusing, and you just want them to win. You were just rooting for them as I was watching the show. So then once they work it all out, you know, they all contribute to work on the shelter, and Iyanla tells them that they did it with minimum instruction because they were working together, you know, and she praises them for completing the exercise, you know, as quickly as they did and the way that they were able to do it. Next, Iyanla has a sit down with Marcus alone. And so Marcus admits that he is not proud of the things that he's done in his past. And he also feels regret for not protecting Miguel. And I think this was actually when they had the conversation where he said that he just knew that somebody was going to die that night. And so Marcus says that, you know, he became the protector of his brothers at the age of 7, you know, because Michael wasn't there mentally, I guess, to be the leader of the family. And so when Iyanla brings up, you know, him running away from the group home and leaving Marvin behind, Marcus says that, you know, it was bigger than that whole situation. And so he admits that, I think he said that, you know, he was like a Billy badass, and he, you know, let the people know that they weren't going to do anything to his brothers. So he thought that he had ingrained in people that if anything happened to his brothers, they were going to have to deal with him. Like, he didn't realize that once he left, that he was exposing the younger brothers, you know, to harm and danger. And that's why it was just, I guess sometimes they weren't in the same foster home, and then other times they were in the same foster home. And I know it's just like a whole lot of story that they're trying to compact into a few hours, so a lot of the details are getting missed in the editing of the show. So, but basically, Iyanla lets him know that he was too young to take on that type of responsibility, and that it wasn't him who failed his brothers, that it was his father who failed his brothers, because he had all them children and left them out into the world to fend for themselves. And then Iyanla hugged him, and he broke down crying. And just to see him crying, because he was like the strong, paternal figure, trying to hold it together for his brothers, but he's so broken and damaged that he can barely hold himself together. So Iyanla meets with the daddy. Iyanla's seeking to understand like what in the world occurred. And so the dad says that he ended up a single parent, after his wife left him, and he claims that he didn't know why the wife left. But Iyanla lets him know that that's a lie. That he was getting on her nerves, and she needed to know the truth and needed him to stop playing around. So then, she basically tells him, your wife left because she was a drug addict, and your wife was making babies while she was a drug addict, and now you got this mess. You got all these boys out here just broken and lost and confused in the world. So during the conversation, Iyanla was like fighting back, being pissed off at him, and she told him that she was doing everything that she could not to go off on him. And when they talked about the boys, he says that they're all very angry with him, and Iyanla was like, well, rightfully so, because you failed them. Like, you got them in this mess that they're in. And so Iyanla learned that it's a long-lasting cycle of fathers failing their kids, because the dad said that he didn't have his father in his life either. I don't know why we can't figure it out that children need their mothers and their fathers, and that if you cannot be in your child's life, stop making babies. Because I'm thinking these kids are stair-step kids, because I think the sister is the oldest, and then they go from the age of the sister 38 down to Marvin, who's the youngest, and I think he's 28. So over a 10-year period, you had 8 children. You fathered 8 children. Your wife gave birth to 8 children, and y'all was on drugs the entire time. So Iyanla tells him that he needs to be willing to face his sons and admit his failures in order for the cycle of abuse to stop. And so, she tells him that, you got to be willing to sit in your truth, and you got to be willing to let them beat you up and say what they want, do what they want. Like, you got to be able to take it, just like they had to take living without him and, all the things that they experienced. And so on the next episode, on part 2, the dad is going to join the group, and I'm just watching the previews and look like it's going to be a mess. So guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Leave your comments below, rate the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.